Awesome. Now we're going to switch over to the Q&A portion of the session. And so I'm going to start by introducing you to an advisor in our office, Elaine Wood. Elaine?
Hi, everyone. Welcome, class of 2024. I'm one of the regional advisors in the GEO office, so hopefully I'll be seeing many of you before too long. Yeah, we're here to field any questions that you have, however general or specific today, and we'll also be, you're also welcome to ask questions specifically to our student panelists if they're more appropriate to them.
Awesome. First question that we have in the chat. Can we pursue an independent research project while studying abroad?
So that is sort of a loaded question. So the best answer will be potentially. We have one advisor in our office who specifically works with students interested in internships and research opportunities abroad. There is a lot of planning that needs to go into that kind of opportunity. So my best advice would be to collect all of the information about your interests and make an appointment to see Haley Broadhead in the GEO office to talk more about the potential for that kind of opportunity panning out for you. The earlier, the better.
Exactly. So keep
their curricular requirements and will this program meet their needs? Is it a niche program in the arts or is it a very STEM heavy program? We have really a myriad of programs that can meet just about any student's needs, from an art history major to an engineer and everything in between. But other things that students want to be thinking about is what kind of environment do they want to be in? Do they want to be in a big foreign university or a small program run by an American university abroad? Do they need a lot of support? Do they want to go through what we call a third-party provider and work with someone in an office in a US institution to help them get abroad? Or do they want to enroll directly on their own, with our help, of course, but enroll directly in a big foreign university? The different types of settings are just incredibly different. You're also dealing with the decision of, do you want to be in a really warm climate? Do you want to be in, are you open to being in a cooler climate, someplace that's, you know, the difference between Denmark and Australia. So again, lots of different choices to make and considerations to make when you're looking at different options.
Wonderful. Yeah, and the advisors, that's what they're here for, is to help you think through all of those considerations. So the next question is, can we fulfill Trinity Pratt requirements by taking classes abroad, like quantitative science, arts and language, etc.?
Yeah, so we're talking about the areas. So areas of knowledge are able to be met, are able to transfer back with the courses that you take abroad. As long as the course you take is Duke approved, you will bring back and meet whatever areas of knowledge are attached to that course. If we want to talk about modes of inquiry, those you're going to be limited with your courses abroad to just the foreign language requirement in some cases. But the other modes of inquiry have to be met at Duke.
Wonderful. And is it common for pre-med students to study abroad?
It is. I see a lot of pre-med students who come in very nervous and unsure if it will work for them. And I actually meet with a fair amount of students who end up, pre-med students who end up going abroad and bringing back courses that are going to keep them moving forward. So absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit more about language requirements and whether or not they need to know a language or if they have to take language classes while they're abroad?
That will vary by program, but from my perspective, and every region is a little bit different in the programs included in our regions. In my region, there are very few programs where you are required to have a certain level of language. You are always going to be required to take at least one language course when you study on a program in a country where English is not the native language. But in terms of having to have a certain level of language before you go, it's very easy to find programs where all your classes will be in English.
Okay, and the next question, how long do summer abroad research programs, internships usually last?
I am not the expert on that one, so I don't want to get too specific. The only answer that I would have for that I could be certain of is that it's going to vary widely.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I can speak a little bit from the domestic side of things. The big internship program we have in the summer is the New York Arts and Media program, and that one is 8 weeks long. Internships tend to be a little bit longer just because by the time you get all of your onboarding done at your employer and you really get into like the meat and potatoes of what you're working on, you need to be there a little bit longer. So that is, I think, one of the longer GEO Duke Duke in programs that we run in the summer, the 8-week program in New York. But otherwise, it varies widely based on where you go and what program you're going on.
That makes sense.
Any other questions out there, or anything, Elaine, that you want to add?
Just that I would hope that if students are here and they had the interest in coming to this session, they already are thinking ahead that this might be something they want to pursue, and hopefully they'll come in one of our offices and meet with us and find out even more about how to get things started and begin their planning. But I just want to drive home the point that really any Duke major can study abroad. It's with enough planning, even majors that might consider themselves, or students that might consider themselves to be in a major that might be more difficult to meet the requirements, with enough planning, almost anyone can make that happen. So it's never too early to come in and meet with us and have an initial conversation and find out what you need to do.
Well, I'll transition us now to the student panel, and Elaine and I will both still be here to chime in with the GEO perspective, but I always think it's best to hear from the students and hear their experiences and perspectives. So I'm going to introduce all 4 panelists, and I'm going to give them a chance to give their name, their major, and the experience that they had on GEO program or programs. So first, Sophia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sophia. This is my dog, Lily. So I am a senior at Duke this year, like class of 2021. And I'm studying global health and public policy as a double major. And I've done 2 different GEO study away experiences. I did one this summer after my freshman year, which was a little over 4 weeks in Venice, Italy, doing public policy. And then this past spring, I was in Geneva, Switzerland, doing a public health program that also included an independent study component.
Wonderful. Megan?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Megan. I'm a senior at Duke as well. And my majors are Russian language and literature and biology. And my study away experience was in the summer after my first year at Duke, and it was in St. Petersburg, Russia, where I took 2 language classes. And my program in particular was a little bit different because it was a hybrid program with Duke Engage. And I see Cash has a question in the chat about whether or not we can pursue community service abroad. So my program is one example in which you can. I believe it is still the only hybrid program between study abroad and Duke Engage. But that, if you have specific questions about that, I can help answer that. Again, it was in St. Petersburg, Russia. It was an amazing experience.
Wonderful. Grace?
Hi, I'm Grace. I'm also a member of the class of 2021, and I'm double majoring in global health and environmental science and policy with a minor in visual and media studies. And I had the opportunity to study abroad on a Duke approved program. So I spent my fall 2019 semester at DIS Copenhagen.
Thank you. And Cameron?
Yeah, hi. I'm a rising junior, and I'm majoring in electrical and computer engineering and computer science with a Spanish minor. And last summer, so the summer after my freshman year, I did Duke in Spain, which is just a 6-week program in Madrid where I took 2 Spanish classes and traveled around with the program. So, yeah.
Great. So to address Cash's question, can we pursue community service abroad? Megan, do you want to talk a little bit more about your experience with service?
Yeah, sure. So basically the breakdown of what I did was, it was a 6-week program in Russia, and I spent pretty much every day of the week, the morning in class, and then the afternoon would be spent at the St. Petersburg Institute for the Blind, where I was basically like forced into speaking Russian because like no one could speak English. And it was like a really interesting experience because not only could you not speak English, you also couldn't use like gestures to kind of get your point across. So it was a really unique experience of like being forced to learn a language by being immersed in it, and also like providing a service at the same time. And basically the service we did was, it was a lot of administrative work, but it was also, you know, like accompanying the participants of the St. Petersburg Institute for the Blind on different excursions, or like kind of just like being a companion to them.
Wonderful. And if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm just going to start asking the panelists about their different experiences. So I have some questions about your housing. So did anybody have a unique housing situation? Anybody stay with a homestay?
I did. I can.
Okay.
So when I was in Copenhagen, I did stay in a homestay, which was a really unique and rewarding experience because DIS Copenhagen is actually an American-run program, though it's not affiliated with the local university. So all your classmates are American students. Your professors are Danish, but teach in English. And so you really kind of have to make an effort if you want to be really immersed in Danish culture. And a great way to do that is living in a homestay. And it was a really good balance between cultural immersion and also comfort because the families in Denmark are often really, really fluent in English. The children start learning English in elementary school. So I had an 11-year-old host sister and I could interact with her really well. My family had also lived in the US for a year. So my host sister was a little bit better at English than most of her peers. But it was really nice to have the family experience of being able to eat meals with my host family, and it helped definitely quell any like feelings of isolation that I could have had. And it was nice to have a home base and just to have people who were just as excited to be showing me around Denmark as I was to be going around Denmark with them. So I would highly recommend doing a homestay to get a more authentic abroad experience.
Awesome. Cameron or Sophia, do you want to add anything about homestays or your homestay experience?
So I had a homestay in one of my experiences and didn't have a homestay in the other. And I want to say, I think Grace is right about feeling more immersed, and especially if you're afraid about feeling isolated. I know some people are more comfortable like going to English speaking countries or like going with a lot of people they know. And I chose to go abroad total opposite time of most of my friends, to a country in which like I didn't really speak the language. I only spoke a little, and was totally unfamiliar with everything. So isolation was something I was concerned about, but like excited to have as a challenge. And having a homestay mom was so wonderful. The other experience I had without a homestay was fine. I just think it was a little bit more challenging to get out and explore, but usually I think you end up having other people who are more involved. So I had a really involved teaching assistant who was from the area, on the other program. And so she really connected with the students and showed us around. But I definitely recommend a homestay component if you like to have that like base family unit. But if you're totally okay being independent all the time, then it's also not necessary.
Great. Anything to add, Cameron?
I guess I'd just add that like you really do get to know them well, and like I was only there for 6 weeks, and I still text with my host parents and keep in touch with them, and it's been really fun to just be able to, you know, like check in and be like, oh, like, you know, how's Spain doing during the pandemic, and like how's, you know, my professors that they keep in touch with and stuff like that in Spain. So I feel like it also like kind of leaves that lasting connection there too, where like anytime I go back to Madrid, I fully would go visit them and go see them. So I think that that's also a cool aspect of it.
Did it help you with your language acquisition too, Cameron?
Yeah, so for me, So I actually did go into the program already fluent in Spanish, but of course it was still tricky to like sit down at dinner and like they don't speak English. So I'm sitting there like just speaking Spanish with them. And, we're like, oh, like broccoli, like what's the word for broccoli? We have to like point at it and like figure it out. We're all like Google translating together and like trying to figure everything out. And so it was definitely, it was really fun to get to just again immerse myself in that and really have to just jump into speaking Spanish at every meal and like really without another option. So for sure.
Great. So I think each of you probably has a different perspective on this question, but what led you to choose the program or programs that you chose? We can start with Megan, and then I'd like to hear from all of you.
Yeah, so as you guys might know, there is a language requirement at Duke. So I came into Duke not really knowing what language I wanted to do. I had taken French all throughout high school, and I grew up in China, so I was like fluent in Mandarin already. So then I was like, oh, I really liked Russian literature in high school. Maybe I'll take some Russian classes. And then I ended up going abroad to Russia just because, it's like a really cool way to spend the summer, especially with the Duke Engage component that had some relation to my being pre-med as well. So yeah, I went to Russia, took the language classes, and now I already finished a Russian major. So you never know what can come from a study abroad experience.
That's awesome. Grace, what helped you choose your program?
Yeah, so I actually started my Duke career as a Pratt student. So I spent the whole first year at Duke in Pratt, and I ended up transferring to Trinity that summer and starting my sophomore year in Trinity. So when I arrived in Trinity, I was a little behind on some of the course requirements. And I decided I wanted to do a double major, which meant basically every class I took for the rest of my Duke career would be very, very much like jam-packed to fulfill everything. And so I picked DIS Copenhagen because I had already met my language requirement. I took one 300 level French class and I was done with that. And I knew that there were no French speaking programs that could meet requirements for either / both of my majors. So I said, well, I've never taken any other language. I don't want to start a language anew. I don't really have room in my schedule for that. So what can I do that's English speaking? And so I was looking at the different English speaking programs, and DIS had the ability to take classes for both of my majors, which was super amazing. So while I was on DIS, I took 5 classes. 2 went to my global health major, 2 went to my environmental science and policy major, and my 5th class, Danish, was just sort of everyone takes it because you have to take the language of the country you're in. So I chose DIS because it fit perfectly in with my academic goals and allowed me to study abroad without sacrificing any academic requirements or having to add on an extra semester. And I also liked how comprehensive the program was. You do have 1 day a week on Wednesdays every week. Sorry, that was really redundant. But each Wednesday, there are no classes offered, and instead you go on what are called field studies, which are local field trips with your course. You may have 1 or 2 field studies each week, but you'll go on 2 or 3 for each of the courses you take. And so that opportunity to both learn inside and outside of the classroom, as well as to travel with your class, because you will take a core course, like a focus class, and you'll travel with them for 2 separate weeks while you're at DIS. So the ability to take learning into more of a career and exploratory lens was really, really appealing to me, as well as being able to meet my major requirements, even though I transferred out of Pratt. So it's a really, really great flexible program for people in any major.
Great. How about Sophia?
So for my first study abroad experience, I had already been to Italy once on a class trip in high school and absolutely loved it. I knew that it probably wasn't going to be where I ended up doing a semester abroad later. But at that point, I had actually already decided on going to Switzerland for a semester at some point later in my Duke career. So I went to Italy kind of just because I wanted to. That's part of why I did it on a summer program. I did actually get credit for public policy while I was on that program because it was a Duke Inn taught by a pub hall professor. And I had an awesome time, but for my semester experience, I wanted to balance both like my own personal interests and what I'm studying. So that's how I ended up in Switzerland. I think the Switzerland story is a little funny just because I came into Duke and Duke had 3 programs in Switzerland that were related to public health that I could do. And they do revise which programs they're accepting and which programs they offer. So I definitely recommend checking every year because 2 of those 3 programs actually Duke doesn't accept and or hold anymore. So I ended up doing a program with SIT in Switzerland. And so I had classes that contributed to my major, but I would have gone, or to my global health major, but I would have gone regardless of that because I was really looking at Switzerland as a place that I potentially want to work in the future for the UN or the WHO, and I could go do site visits there. We had all sorts of meetings with officials at different organizations. And then also I'm taking French at Duke, so I got to practice that because in Geneva, that is the primary language that they speak, even though the larger portion of Switzerland speaks German. So I really just wanted the experience to academically include public health, whether or not Duke was going to count them towards anything. They ended up counting most of it. I did not transfer my foreign language credit just because they teach language differently than we do. So the way that Duke has their levels is different than theirs. And what I placed into there was what Duke considered something that I had already done. But the way that they set up the language class, it was a ton of just like speaking and experiencing as opposed to steadfast grammar every single day. It was a lot of, can you actually function as opposed to like write a good paper. And I think it was awesome to have that balance experience in that. I still have 1 class to fulfill for my language at Duke. And I think having gone abroad and had a different class experience, I'll be more confident when I enter that last language class.
Great. Cameron?
Yeah, mine was pretty simple. I had studied Spanish all my life and knew I wanted to go abroad in a Spanish-speaking country. But growing up, my teachers had always been from Latin America, and so I was really excited to go learn kind of a different Spanish in Spain. And it also happened that the classes offered on that program were really helpful toward my minor. And so really just through those 2 avenues, I ended up picking Duke in Spain.
Great. And then did any of you travel on a budget? Were any of you on a pretty strict budget while you were studying abroad? I see Sophia nodding her head, and I also see Grace raising her hand. Sophia, tell us a little bit about living on a budget abroad and what that was like.
So I'm on full financial aid at Duke, and they do give you some money for like incidentals. And I also generally work during the school year. So I planned ahead. You have to plan ahead in order to do it on a budget. So even though I didn't actually like really closely know anyone on my summer program, I found someone and connected with her a couple months before, and we started planning what we wanted to do. So that way when we bought plane or train tickets, they would be really cheap. We did hostels always, and like the big community group. And we actually met a ton of cool people traveling that way, staying in hostels and doing super early or late at night airplane rides. When I was in Switzerland for the whole semester, I didn't plan any trips until after I got there, just because I wasn't sure what I would want to do or where I would exactly want to go within the country. And I figured my host family would be really helpful with that. I will say that Duke's financial aid allotment for that like incidental doesn't change based on the cost of living where you're going. So you can go somewhere where their money, like the American dollar, is very strong, and that's awesome. Like suddenly you're rich in that country's currency. Or you can go someplace like Switzerland, which has one of the most expensive costs of living in the world, and definitely have to work a lot of extra hours at your job to kind of make up that difference if you want to do it. But that also plays into like where you wanted to study. I could have gotten other public health experiences outside of Switzerland. I just really strongly wanted to go there, and so I planned and compensated for it, but it's definitely still possible. The really, really nice thing about the program that I had in Switzerland is, so they have the train system that runs all over the country, and it normally costs a good chunk of money, like to just do one trip here or there. But when you're on the program, they buy you a Swiss pass. So it actually allows you to travel anywhere within the country's borders, including just over the border to France, because there's a lake, by train, bus, or car without having to pay. So if you're in like a trolley car or something. So that was also really nice. I went to several different weekend trips just on the free train ride that the program provided.
Great. Grace, do you have some suggestions for budgeting and living on a budget?
Yeah, so my experience is a little bit different from Sophia's because I am not on financial aid at Duke, but my parents are very, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this. My parents are very cheap. I guess I could have said thrifty, but my parents told me, we'll pay for your semester abroad, but you get no spending money from us, which is pretty standard, like very reasonable. So I've worked a lot. Like I worked average 2 or 3 jobs every summer since I started college. And so I had a good amount saved. And before I started my semester, I set a budget for myself of how much I would spend per month. And one of those things that really helped me save money was a lot of people, especially in Copenhagen and on DIS, they will buy lunch every single day because people don't want to cook. There's lots of good food. And so one of the things that I knew was living in a homestay helped me save a lot of money, because my homestay family would pack lunches for me every day. And that was pretty common amongst my friends who lived in homestays. And my homestay family would also cook dinner for me and buy me stuff for breakfast. So my meals during the week were totally covered. And that was the thing that I saw my friends spend the most money on, was always going out to lunch, always going out for coffee, always grabbing dinners. So keeping your meal times as like minimal cost as possible is really helpful. And then also a big thing for me was how I scheduled my classes. I scheduled my classes so I didn't have any class on Fridays, which meant I could take a flight on Thursday night, which was significantly cheaper than flying on Friday or flying on Saturday morning. So by working around your classes, so maybe you are taking, maybe you don't have class on Monday, or maybe you don't have class on Friday, you can fly on days that are significantly cheaper. I got really good at packing, so I could buy the cheapest airline tickets as possible and pack like very minimally, which is really hard for me because I'm kind of a maximalist. But I learned how to, layer, combine outfits so I didn't have to bring a lot of clothes. And then one thing that I highly, highly recommend is look at what free things you can do. Because when you study abroad, you'll get a student visa that has like in Denmark, we have a residence permit. And if you're under 24, there are tons of things you can do for free. So like you can go to the Louvre for free. Pretty much every museum in Paris is free with a student visa. And it's like that in multiple countries. And I actually didn't find that out until like halfway through my semester. So I had spent a lot more money on museums and different cultural things that would have been totally free. So I recommend, I use Google Docs a lot just to write out, this is my budget for this trip. This is the time. I mapped out every single minute of my experience so I could maximize how many free things I was doing to like get the most benefit. But like Sophia said, hostels are super huge. I would stay in shared rooms in hostels because all you need is a place to sleep. And bring a lock if you're really scared about your suitcase getting like rifled through. I didn't have any experience like that. But main tips, book weird flights, eat at home as much as you can, stay in hostels, and also take advantage of public transit. The Maps app on your iPhone or on your smartphone, 9 times out of 10 will have the complete public transit maps and routes for your area, wherever you're going. So you can just put in where you want to go and it will tell you which bus to take, which train to take, which station, like where to stand in the station, everything. And so that saves way more money than taking a taxi or an Uber or something. But yeah, those are all of my tips.
It's great advice. Public transportation can be really intimidating if you haven't used it before. We do have at least 2 STEM majors here. And I did want to ask, Megan, as a biology major, I know you focus mostly on your Russian major, but how did you fit in study away into your plans? And what did you have to consider as a biology major?
Okay, I might not be the best person to ask this because I actually declared biology as my second major in my junior year. So it's like not part of the plan at all. But I think but doing study abroad helped a lot because it got my first major out of the way really quickly. So now I can focus a lot on biology. So for example, all of my classes for this upcoming semester are towards my biology major. So I think doing study abroad early on can help with that, because it'll then basically shift a lot of the heavy lifting towards the beginning. So then the rest of your career at Duke, you can take classes that you want for fun, or, you know, add a second major or a minor. So don't plan poorly like me, but if you do, just know that, you know, there's always another way to fit something into your Duke career.
I think that also speaks nicely to the flexibility of the Duke liberal arts education. You know, that's what they're telling you all during orientation, is that this is a very flexible curriculum, and it is. You can declare a biology major your junior year and still get it done. Cameron, you're an engineering major. Can you talk a little bit about being an engineer and studying away?
Yeah, so in Pratt, you definitely have less flexibility, but I mean, obviously, so I studied abroad in the summer, which was a huge thing, and obviously doesn't affect your classes at all at Duke. But then I was actually also planning on going abroad this fall. And that is, when you look at a full semester, it's definitely a little trickier than than a lot of other majors, but there's plenty of options, and you can take engineering classes abroad, or you can, you know, reorganize your classes other semesters to make sure that you get all your stuff done without having to take any abroad, if there aren't classes offered where you want to go. So you're still pretty flexible. It's definitely a little trickier, and you have to pay a little attention to it, but between like your academic dean and then the GEO advisors, it's pretty manageable to figure out going anywhere at some point, especially if you start planning early.
It's also a good reminder addressing the fall semester, because we didn't talk about in the previous Q&A anything about COVID. And so Elaine, would you like to speak a little bit to what's going on with COVID-19 and GEO?
Well, it definitely makes our life more interesting. We continue to plan for spring 2021. We're actively working with students who are planning to go abroad. Some of them are deferring from a program they hoped to do in the fall that was canceled. And some of them were just newly applying for spring. So we're working with those students. We're also starting to plan summer, and we're also working with students for next fall, some students who are looking ahead to next fall. What we don't know is what COVID will do next, and how the world will look. So we're being cautious. We won't send a student abroad. We won't send students abroad if it's not safe to do so, obviously. We're going to follow all the federal guidelines, local guidelines, and Duke has the final say for what Duke students are able to do. So we're planning, we're moving ahead because that's what we do. And then we're gonna keep everyone posted as time goes on. I'd encourage students to keep an eye on our website, to watch social media. Definitely reach out to our advisors, to me and the other advisors in the office. You can find us through our website. There's an advising tab at the top of our website. You can reach out to us by email or go online and make an appointment with us as of the end of August. So just stay in touch with us and we'll let you know what's going on.
Thank you, Elaine.
Sure.
So we are, I have one more question. If there aren't any questions from the students attending, please continue to drop your questions in the chat and I'll ask them of our student panel. Oh, I did get a question. So could you please elaborate a bit about the stuff to keep in mind while applying as a first-year student for summer? Elaine, that might be a good question for you. Is there anything a first-year student should think about if they're thinking about going this summer or summer 2021?
Well, one thing that students often ask me is, what the requirements are. Very basic requirements to apply for a program. We ask for students to do a statement of purpose, a statement of interest, why they're interested in a particular program, to get a transcript, to submit a transcript to us. I'll deal with that in a second, a transcript, and to ask for a letter of reference from a faculty member. For first year students, it can be a little more challenging getting us a transcript before the deadline for some programs, and also getting us a faculty letter can be tricky for first year students. So for those two items, they are going to be required for all the programs that we run in summer, but the students just have to come to us with their questions. It's not going to make or break their application. We just need to be aware that they're a first year student, and we'll let them know what they need to do to work with those requirements. And it won't disadvantage them in the end. But I can also say that most of our summer programs don't have prerequisites. A few of them will, but most of them are going to be open to any Duke student. And a very large percentage of students who enroll in our summer programs have just completed their first year, so they would be in good company. So first year students are not only welcome, they're a very high percentage of students on those programs.
And then a follow-up question around when are the deadlines for applying to summer programs?
That may change this year, but typically the deadlines, there will be a few unique deadlines for language programs that in the past have hit as early as early December. The vast majority of summer programs have a deadline that's February 1st. Our deadlines may change this year due to COVID, which may shift our planning. But typically we'd be looking at a few in December and the rest in early February.
Great, thank you. So question for the panelists. If you could share a highlight of your program. I think hearing from each of you on this would be great. I'll start with Cameron. A highlight of your program that you'd like to share with the group?
Yeah, I'm going to give two. I think that one really cool thing about Duke in Spain is that you are in class with all Duke students. And so our program, between traveling together on the weekends through the program, and we ended up deciding to travel together even on our free weekends. And then also, being in class together every day, and every now and then going in and getting dinner together and whatnot. We ended up getting really close, and there were only like 23 of us on the program together. So I loved having that community, and then being able to come back and, we still all get together and do stuff. So that was really fun to get to go there and meet all these people from Duke who I probably would never have come across on campus. And now I have that community. But then also I did love the homestay, and I think that that was a huge perk for me, getting to meet my homestay parents and hearing their recommendations and all their stories about the city, and just like kind of getting that little insider scoop, I guess. And so I guess those two things were my favorite parts.
Great. Megan.
Yeah, so I think my favorite part about my program was the fact that I could do language as well as Duke Engage together, which I know it's like the only program, unfortunately. But I think what was so cool about it was the fact that I know that a lot of you guys are probably interested in Duke Engage, and that was probably one of the reasons you decided to come to Duke. And I think that study abroad combined with Duke Engage is such like an informative experience of learning about yourself. I think a lot of people think that Duke Engage is about like, oh, what you can do for others, but it's like really, like getting to know yourself. And study abroad is probably also one of the few times you'll be living relatively independently abroad in a completely new place, or a different place in the States. And it's kind of like a first experience of adulthood, which is amazing and I highly recommend. So I think just being kind of forced to live in a foreign country and experience something completely different from cultures that I grew up in and that I'm used to, that was my absolute favorite part.
That's great, thank you. Sophia.
So I think a huge highlight for my first program was in Italy was that very often the culture was different, and I had to adjust and ask questions and learn how to assert myself. Because when you're an American in other countries, like sometimes shopkeepers and other people like try to take advantage of you, like charge you more money or whatever. And I learned very quickly that I'm capable of like brawling with the big dogs, I guess, when it comes to like bartering and other important life skills, actually, even back in the US. And I think in Switzerland, something I'll say, I don't know how many of you it applies to, but I made a lot of friends on my program, but I also had the opportunity to connect with some locals and make friends. I ended up actually in a relationship with someone in Switzerland, and through both academics and through personal connections I made there, made some professional connections with the WHO and at the UN that I'll probably use later when I'm applying to jobs and looking at grad schools. So it's very much about you and what you want to learn and grow personally, but don't be afraid to also explore professional world, or even bring it up with like your friends and loved ones in those other like countries and places.
That's great. Grace?
So the highlight of my experience was definitely living with my homestay family. I had like an above and beyond experience with them. They even took me on a trip to Berlin, which was like totally, I don't want to like establish that as the norm because I'm definitely like the only one of my friends who had that sort of homestay experience, but like I got really close with them when my mom came and visited me. It was to the point like she stayed, actually we didn't even get a hotel. She stayed at my homestay with me because my host family wanted to get to know her. At some point when COVID's over, they're going to come visit us in the US. Like I'm just super close with them now. I talk to them all the time. We FaceTime, we text, everything like that. So that was definitely a highlight of my experience. And I would say the other highlight of my experience was, this is pretty like niche, but I took a course on renewable energy systems. And for our field study, we actually got to climb a wind turbine and go inside of one, all the way to the very top. I was super sore afterwards because I went on, I believe, like 10 stories of ladders. Like it was a totally insane experience that you would not be able to have in the United States because of how basically how prevalent wind energy is in Denmark and how there's none of the same stigma towards renewable energy that we have in the US. So just getting that really unique immersive experience that I would probably never be able to get here. Like every single one of my field studies was very like relevant to the work I could be doing for either of my majors, and just seeing how things are when they're not sort of like marred by the American paradigm is really, really unique because American education is great, but it has its flaws. So being able to sort of detach from that, I think is a really valuable experience, and it makes you a more mature individual. So can't recommend it enough.
That's wonderful. If anyone has any final questions for our panelists, I'm happy to sneak one or two more in before we close out. Otherwise, actually, as a follow-up to Grace's question or Grace's answer, what's interesting about SAT is there are the field study elements. So do you want to talk just briefly about your field study and that component of those programs? I'm sorry. Yeah, Grace.
Yeah, well, so in DIS, it wasn't one of like the formal study programs. It's just, yeah. So every week you have what's called a field study. So each of your courses will have certain field trips. So for example, my Danish language and culture class, we went to a Danish high school and we talked to Danish students about what it's like to go to American high school. What are the differences? And we got to practice our Danish. And then I was in a public mental health course, and we went to a headquarters of a global pharma company, and we learned about the development of pharmaceuticals, specifically for those like SSRIs and other mental health drugs. And I was in this is really cool, I was in an urban livability course, which is sort of a mix of like urban planning, sustainability, like everything, culture, everything fun. And what we did for our field studies in that class is we actually did a biking tour of the city. So we biked like, I think 12 miles in total, because it was a long day, but we biked around and went to different neighborhoods, and we learned about the architecture, we learned about the history, and all of your field studies will be working with experts in the field. And then like with my core course, which was public health delivery and prioritization, So we did lots of different field studies in and around Copenhagen, but that was actually the class we traveled with. So we spent about 5 days in Western Denmark. We went to 2 different cities. We met with all kinds of different health professionals, from community health workers to actual doctors to pharmacists, all kinds of different things. And we got to interview them, learn about their experiences. And then we spent a full week, half of it in Tallinn, Estonia, and half of it in Helsinki, Finland, doing the same kind of work, where we went and met with all sort of different people working in healthcare. We analyzed socialized healthcare systems and how they work. And then of course, they do a really good job of also having you do fun things. So like we got to take a walking tour of old medieval Estonia. We got to go to a national park in Finland and experience a Finnish smoke sauna, which was really interesting. So it's all about learning inside and outside of the classroom. And to me, that was what was so special about DIS as a program, and that I really didn't feel like I would get that experience anywhere else.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, a lot of programs have embedded components with field studies and experiential learning components. So that's definitely something you can take advantage of on the GEO programs. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending today. I want to thank our panelists and thank Elaine for coming in and answering questions. This concludes our session today, but I want you to be sure to reconnect with our office again during GEO Week. That's going to be September 17th through the 25th. And so we hope to see some of the same people coming to those sessions and learning more about what GEO has to offer here at Duke. Thank you so much, and good luck in your first couple weeks of class.